had a golden retriever who was our first born, right? Our starter pup, our starter kid. And at 4.5, he got sick and autoimmune hepatitis. And the more I was asking questions out of heartbreak and just complete confusion about his environment, I was finding out more and more about the lack of regulation, the lack of oversight, the not even required testing for chemicals that are in human products in the United States. There's no books on this. There's no one really talking about water. And the thing about water is that we're made up of water. 85% of our body is water. In order to really help our body rinse from anything we're exposed to, you really kind of need to start with water coming in.
Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast. I'm your host, Julie Michelson, and today we are joined by Dr. Aly Cohen, a board-certified rheumatologist and integrative medicine physician who's one of the country's leading medical and legal experts in environmental health. Dr. Cohen is the co-author of the best-selling consumer guidebook, Non-Toxic: Guide to Living Healthy in a Chemical World, and the co-editor of the textbook Integrative Environmental Medicine. She manages the Smart Human social media platform and podcast while continuing to see patients in her medical practice in New Jersey. Her latest book, Detoxify: The Everyday Toxins Harming Your Immune System and How to Defend Against Them, is an absolute must-read. In today's conversation, we're talking about the wisdom that Dr. Cohen shares in Detoxify, and how we can all take simple steps to reduce our toxic burden and live healthier lives, whether looking to reverse symptoms or avoid getting sick in the first place. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here, Julie.
I am so excited for this conversation that I had to make myself stop and hit record because I just can't wait to dig in and share Detoxify with listeners. This book is life-changing, I think, because of how you break things down for people to really just make simple yet really impactful changes. So share a little bit of your journey. I know your story's in the book, but allow listeners to understand that you too are just a person, right? Even though you're this brilliant doctor. And we tend to show up here on the podcast through some kind of personal experience that shifted.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, I am a regular person and that's how I've always, and I still see myself as on this journey, but the journey began actually, I wouldn't say I chose it. I became a physician, internal medicine, then I went to rheumatology as a specialty. I learned everything I was taught. I'm a really good student. I don't fight authority. My dad's a doctor. No, not typically. Now I'm different. But, my father's a physician, 85 years old, still practicing nephrology. And, it's baked into my family as a physician, right? Western trained. And I got out of fellowship. I moved to the countryside in New Jersey, central New Jersey, had two small kids, and I had a golden retriever who was our first born, right? Our starter pup, our starter kid. And at he was 4.5 years old at the time that he got sick. And I had I think a 2-year-old and a 6 months old, something like that. And my dog, who was 4.5, got sick. And we didn't understand why he got sick, but he's a golden. We thought he ate something. We figured it would come out the other end. No big deal. And it turned out that he had autoimmune hepatitis. And autoimmune hepatitis is not only rare in dogs, but it's really rare in Goldens. And he was so young and experiencing an illness that dogs don't get that I was so upset. I started thinking about what he was eating, what he was drinking, what kind of tick and flea, medications were we using? Well, what about that red toy that was vinyl plastic that he sucked on all day long? And the more I was asking questions out of heartbreak and just complete confusion about his environment, I was finding out more and more about the lack of regulation, the lack of oversight, the not even required testing for chemicals that are in human products in the United States and all the things we love. And I didn't realize at that time, I mean, now I can look back and say that was an environmental health evaluation I was doing, a
Right.
survey. And now I have that in the book now for anyone to read and kind of look over their own life. But that's how I got started in this. And it took on a life of its own because I reached out to environmental working group.
Hmm.
At the time, that was all I saw on the internet 15
Sure.
years ago. And I said, hey guys, I want to do a local lecture. Would you guys teach me a little or show me some of your resources? Or and they couldn't believe a doctor had actually reached out to them.
Isn't that
And
sad?
it is so sad. They said, you're the first doctor that ever reached out to us. And we ended up putting together a CME lecture for, I think I lectured to 30 hospital systems, their grand rounds, but no one was really, paying that much attention.
It
And
was very fringe back then,
yeah,
and like almost conspiracy theory 15 years ago
but it was
of
all based on data. Like everything they were
yeah.
teaching me was in the medical literature, in peer-reviewed
Right.
journals around
Right.
the world. And so there was such a disconnect between what I was discovering and what I wasn't taught in med school. And it was just remarkable to me, the journey. But 15 years later, two textbooks later, and now this consumer book, like I would say I pretty much have a handle on what's going on.
Yeah.
And then what to do better, like how we can actually really make ourselves feel better, manage diseases, change the destiny of our health in many ways by what we choose, how we live our lifestyle, what we, products we consume and use on our body. So, it's been a long journey, but I wouldn't say that I started by choice, but I've
Right.
now, it was a
Oh, you're
mission.
in it. You can't, and you can't unlearn
Correct.
this stuff. One of the things I love about your book is that we share, which I think is so important for listeners to understand. Anytime we talk about anything toxin related, it can be overwhelming. It can feel overwhelming. And the underlying message in your book is the same as when I work with clients. It's A, we can't be perfect, but B, we don't have to be perfect to heal
Oh, for sure.
and or to prevent, getting sick in the first place. And I love how in the book you break it down and you strategize like, hey, I do the same thing. It's all about the impact, one
Mm,
change at a time. Where are you going to get the most impact?
right.
And then I am a lab geek too. I love to run labs and yeah, but you don't even have to do a toxin panel to reduce your burden and support your detox pathways. So,
No, I
yeah,
encourage people to use their money wisely, use their
yeah,
money on the solutions rather than the testing, because from any given blood test, we know this from any number of blood tests, it doesn't even have to be for chemicals or toxins.
yeah,
It could be for cholesterol or, sugars or what have you, that any given and, evaluation or set of labs results could vary from day to day, week to week, depends
sure.
on a lot of different factors, birthday cake, vacation, the holidays. So the idea is really if you test, you're going to find the same thing over and over again, that we are filled with chemicals. Um, all right, done. Now, what do we do to move forward? And how
Right.
that in a way that's not only going to take it out of our systems, hopefully, or reduce dramatically, but also how we feel, how we manage disease, how do we stay in remission from cancers? How do we keep our bodies thriving? And it's not just removing the chemicals, as you probably saw in the book, it's also what do we add in to make us feel better and to give us the nutrition we've been missing.
I love that. And that is the healing approach, right? We're all missing important things. And then add in some of, I'm not going to guess what your genetics are, but I know mine, we're typically my tribe of people are not good detoxers and we're not, and so there's so much we can do. And I did love that part of the, okay, also add these things. You actually inspired me. I have been a little less practicing what I preach as far as my self-care lately. Things have been a little busy at the clinic. And I'm like, I used to be so much better at focusing on the variety in my veggies and I still always eat a ton of veggies, but I'm not as thoughtful. And I know I feel better when I focus, for myself in a very specific way on what kind of vegetables and how, how many of the different, but especially the cruciferous veggies. So,
Yeah, there is. Yeah. I
yeah,
don't even know
yeah,
half of them because I don't like to cook. I make reservations. So, you know, I mean, the idea that there's this world of superfoods that are available in your supermarket, you can grow them, you can get them frozen organic, which is one of my big recommendations is USDA
yes,
frozen is actually really nutrient rich because they're flash frozen, but also they have far less pesticides and fertilizer chemicals and genetically modified ingredients. So, there's lots of options for everyone, but the idea that we have choices that I didn't even know we had, I just wanted that out all on the table. Here are all your choices. You can do it yourself, cleaning
right,
product recipes, which we have, or you can go to the resources and just buy them if you don't have time to make stuff like I
right.
used years ago. Or, there's just lots of different options.
Yeah, and I love that. It's like you're meeting people where they are. So you're almost like coaching them through your book is really and I always say I'm one of those. I wanted to ask you because you do give wonderful DIY recipes and advice in the book as well. Do you make all of your own stuff?
No.
Me either.
So years ago when I got into this, like back,
You had to.
years ago, I was so, first of all, there wasn't the variety of products that are considered clean now in terms of
Sure.
their transparency and their third-party testing. That is all something that now people want to live up to because they want the market share of clean beauty, clean cosmetics, clean cleaning. But I didn't have those options back then. So I remember making a whole vat of laundry detergent. I mean, if I tell you I had to go to like a Home Depot and get like one of those big plastic containers, and I was boiling Castile soap, and I was like all into it. And by the way, you could hardly find these ingredients in
Yeah.
Walmart. I mean, or
Right.
you couldn't even find clean basic ingredients because
Sure.
the shelves are so filled with crazy chemical cleaners and a million of them
Yeah.
that I actually couldn't even find the ingredients of single, ingredient substances. So the world has changed a lot. I think the world has changed, especially even in the last couple of weeks for sure. But the idea that, we have gotten to a place where people are aware of this topic, they're understanding there may be questions about the safety of the chemicals that were around, that there are options for what to do about it. And by the way, I think regulation is great whenever you see it coming down the pike or taken off the table. Who knows? I don't even care who's in charge. It's too slow for human health. We're
Sure.
never, you take red dye number 3 out, which is fantastic.
It
We
is, but it's like this one thing. And
Yeah. And that's just the food system. I mean, so, people always ask me, what do you think about all this other stuff in politics? And I'm like, I applaud regulation, but I don't think in terms of human health that we're really solving any problems in terms of disease prevention by just taking one thing out at a time. It's never going
right.
to hit the mark.
Yeah. And I get that they have to start somewhere, but when you think of how quickly we've created all of these chemical compounds,
Right.
and it's kind of wild. It really is. And I think one of the things that there's not a ton I really want extremely regulated. But I do think people assume that if stuff is on the market, it's safe,
Right.
right? I
That's
think we're micromanaging the wrong things and we're not educating people about what's really going on. I don't want to presume, but I did as I was reading your book. People ask me all the time, when I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, I was 34. And even my rheumatologist said at the time, you're so young. Everybody was like, you're so young. And now I feel like if you make it to 34 without an autoimmune diagnosis or some other kind of chronic illness, you're rare. Like it has changed that quickly over the past few
For
decades.
sure. I'm sure you've seen that in your clinic, but I've seen that as a rheumatologist
Yeah.
and then it's mirrored by the epidemiologic studies from around the world. So we now know that between 7 and 14% of even just the US population has one type of autoimmune disease and there are about 80 Western diagnosable autoimmune diseases. There's lots of things that are gray zone. They don't fit all those criteria, which I talk about in the book. As a rheumatologist, we're detectives. We have to come up with things and figure out stuff that may not hit the marks for all the classically taught med school, textbook, criteria for a disease or not. But we have such an epidemic that look at the drug market, and I use all the drugs, by the way. I'm not anti-medication. I look at it as another set of tools, which I think,
Sure.
we can all
It's
wrap our head
important.
around.
Yep.
But the,
I mean, I went through that phase as the patient coming off of 10 prescriptions
yeah,
that didn't work.
yeah,
I was a little anti-med in the beginning of
yeah,
my journey until I really started to work fully in functional medicine and realize, okay, there's a time and a place, and the bigger toolbox is the best. That's what we say at the clinic, right? Like but also let's get to the drivers so
right.
that, I always say to people, I want your doctors to do what mine did, which is you don't need this anymore. That's
Yeah.
all. Like
Well, just
but
being judicious. Do we
yeah.
need it? What's the outcome? What's the goals? Did I meet the goals? Are there safer alternatives? What are the side effects? Do they mix with other drugs? These are the kinds of things that, if you, I've had patients that have been left on medicines for 20 years, and I'm always asking, like, your body has changed. You're not even going to have
The
gout.
same person
You're
anymore.
eating exactly. I'm like, your body is not even the same. So, we have to attempt to see if we can, get off of that particular drug. So I think it's just a matter of being an advocate for yourself, having agency over your body, asking very simple, reasonable questions to your healthcare provider, and then I believe in being a savvy consumer, and this is why the book was designed to have ICD-10 codes. If you want to get some metals tested in whole blood and you want to get it done through your insurance, like surprise, surprise, like have your insurance cover it, then you need the right ICD-10 codes. You want to hand that to your doctor and say, listen, would you mind just writing this on a script? You don't have to know
Right.
what or how or whatever. You don't even necessarily have to look up an ICD-10 code. It's here, or
I
some basic
love that. I
information.
love that you're like,
But
okay,
help
this is how
them.
easy we can
Yeah,
make it for people,
right.
and we have come, that has improved as well, that we
Yeah,
can get
sure.
some of this stuff. I was kind of smiling as I was reading the book because some of your favorite panels are some of my favorite panels, and those would be, I consider more of like in the functional medicine kind of cash pay. But I love that we've gotten to a place where, there are ICD-10 codes that you
Mhm.
can use and to run some of this testing through insurance,
Yeah,
which is
like again, I
helpful.
want people to save their money for the important stuff, like getting a reverse osmosis water filter for $300 and paying a plumber $150 here in New Jersey just to put one in for an hour. It takes an hour to put it in. I want people to really be thinking about how to use their money, their sacred, well-earned, hard-earned money, and put it to the right stuff so that you have solutions. You can start to heal. You can start feeling how your body gets better, how you feel better, how your inflammation gets better, because those patient cases in the book are really representative of a lot of patients that you either have seen or maybe you
Sure.
recognize in yourself. So it's just one of those ways. How do you get into the mindset of a practitioner to see how they whittle it down to solutions?
Which is so, and I think that's one of the brilliant approaches in the book, is that anybody who has dealt with chronic just inflammation, forget diagnoses, any of those things. Anyone who, has had the fatigue, the pain, the whatever, fill in the blank, their symptoms are. I love just between your story and the patient stories that you share in the book, they're so relatable,
Yeah,
right? We were joking, earlier, since I grew up in New Jersey as well, and even it's the Garden State, and it is one of the dirtiest places
right.
you can be.
Garden slash pesticide fertilizer state. But
um,
they're great farmers. I actually live and
ah,
hang out with a lot of them in my town, believe it or not.
Oh, I do believe it because I know where I lived not far from where you live, so I miss how lush and
Yeah,
green it gets there. But
yeah,
um, it's we don't you don't have to work in a toxic waste dump to be exposed. One of my favorite stories you shared in the book was the gentleman who owned the pizzeria,
yeah,
right? Like these are regular ways, and you actually really got me thinking about, because one of the first things I tend to do with people that are kind of still in the sad diet,
yeah,
is the move off of soda, right? So and a lot of people are drinking seltzers and drink, we just, it's like
The
again.
packaging, you're talking about the food packaging, things
Yes.
that are sort of outside of even the macros of
You're
food.
making a good choice, but then
Yeah,
you're still getting exposed.
right.
And again, it's not about perfect, and that is where sometimes testing can be great
Oh,
because, you
but
know,
sometimes it's a motivating process. Sometimes you have to show people what they need to see in order to get them moving.
mhm,
Sometimes you just have to say, well, what do you want to be healthy for? Your kids, your
right.
career.
What's your why?
What is
Yeah,
your why? And if their why is reasonable enough for them to get started, it's not my, I'm, you and I feed what we can,
right.
but it's really always going to be the individuals, whether or not they want to move in that direction and how much they want to do. And that's fine. The journey is long. And I mean, I'm still on it and I'm still discovering, a new way to do this or a new way to do that. And it took, I don't know, 10 years to realize that I was rinsing my fruit under the regular sink instead of the reverse osmosis 10 feet away. And I was like, why am I doing that? Like, that's so silly,
I love, see, there's that human part again. I was literally writing a presentation on toxins. This was about probably 6 years ago. And I looked up and in that moment noticed that I was using like the old school drip coffee pot. It had the stainless carafe, but the rest of it was all plastic. And
Yeah.
I used it every day for how long? And it was just like all of a sudden I saw it. And
But
that's
the
the
fact that you saw it, I mean, that's the ideas. And even I teach high school, and I just spoke to 600 kids at my kids' high school, and the kids, obviously, my kids hated that, but
I'm sure, but how
hopefully
wonderful.
they'll be proud at some point in their life. But I said to them, you're not going to know the chemicals I talked about today. You're not going to. This is not the point. The point is your
Right.
body's a sponge. Your body will absorb things throughout your life, whether it's your skin, whether it's intravaginally with feminine care, whether it's, your shampoo, whether it's what you eat and what you drink. The point is to be conscious, to have that awareness now that there can be problems from what you choose. And you just realize that you're walking around with a different vision of how you move through life. And I think that's really the big take home before anything else, because all the minutia is enough to make anyone very scared. So you
It
want to do that
is.
way when when you can sit down and really think about it.
Yeah, it's so overwhelming. You mentioned water and RO a couple times. Um, and not everybody, again, I really do appreciate that because I am somebody, I have a whole house filter
Yeah.
and an RO at my sink, because I was like in the heat of learning all of this stuff when I built this house. And I was like, I want this and that. And they were like, are you crazy? They said the same thing though when I said, I want incandescent light bulbs. They were like, nobody does that anymore. I'm like, well, I do. But water is is like kind of step one, right? This where we're all impacted
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
water, and you share such wisdom because I think most of us tend to, I see it all the time. You did it in your journey. I did it in my journey at one point. We think that the bottled water, um, is a great solution without considering what's in it. Can we just touch on that a little bit as
Yeah.
far as bottled water and then obviously the packaging?
Yeah. So, when I did a deep dive into water, I thought to myself, first of all, there's no books on this. Well, there are a few really good ones out there, I think, since that time, but there's no one really talking about water. We spent a lot of time about which diet, Whole 30, Mediterranean, like keto. We spent a lot of time on the macros of food. We
Mhm.
don't really talk about the quality, and we also don't talk about water. And the thing about water is that we're made up of water. 85, percent of our body is water. And in order to really help our body rinse from anything we're exposed to, you really kind of need to start with water coming in. So I thought to myself, well, let me learn about this. So it turns out that wastewater treatment plants make our tap water, so to speak,
Mhm.
not coming from a well, it comes from municipal tap. And it's a system that we have in the US. And there are about 160,000 of these wastewater treatment plants that scatter the country. And then there's 15% of the US population is serviced by wells, whether it's under your home or a local township. And more rural you get, of course, you're not going to be connected to the water system. So those are wells. Either way you get your water, you are going to want to clean it when it hits your home because that's where you
Yes.
have the greatest amount of control. And the reason we really need to think about this is because the wastewater treatment plants, those 160,000 of them, only follow a law from 1974 still
Stop it.
called the Safe Drinking Water Act, which has not really changed at all in 50 years. And under that law, only 91 chemicals, like arsenic and benzene, and there's a bunch of others people might recognize, but only 91 chemicals are actually measured routinely and remediated if they hit a level called an MCL, a maximum concentration level, which, by the way, is arguably a lot higher than
Yeah.
EPA, than most humans would deem safe, but it
Right.
has to be regulated by the EPA at that level. But we have thousands of chemicals that get into our municipal tap water from lakes, from streams, from aquifers, from sewage, from,
Golf
the
courses,
idea that
farms.
91 is going to do really anything, especially
Yeah.
when it's treated with chlorine, fluoride, and detergents before it leaves,
Uh-huh.
and then travels through PVC piping and lead potentially.
Right.
So the idea is that water is not clean when it hits your house.
But we need to drink a lot of water.
Of course. And so
Yes.
water is so critical. It's part of detoxifying. It's part of keeping your kidneys healthy, keeping your liver flushed, keeping your lymphatic system moving. But we want to think about what we put in. And so bottled water is regulated by the FDA, not the EPA. So it doesn't
Okay.
even have to go through any stringent 91 chemical Safe Drinking Water Act,
Oh my
oversight.
goodness.
And it's often municipal tap water. 75% is just, a company filling up their tap, using tap water and then selling it to you or me
Yep.
$4. So the idea that we can control our water at home, and bring it with us to dinner like I do, or a 3-gallon one on weekend trips, or to lacrosse practices with my kids, or there's lots of options that I talk about in the book, but I want people to understand why there's value in at least moving forward in a filtration process.
Absolutely. And with that being said, back to it's not about being perfect, right? You
Correct.
mentioned in the book, you travel, I travel. There is a time where your best option is going to be bottled water. I tend to go for Italian mineral water in a glass bottle. But and that's just my easy routine. I land wherever I am traveling. I go, to Whole
Yeah.
Foods and buy the my favorite brand, but
Yeah.
that's me. And it doesn't have to be that perfect.
Oh, and on that note, I mean, which I agree with 1,000%, is that you can also bring a big stainless steel bottle.
Yeah.
I wonder if I have it here. I have one here. I don't talk about brands, but just
Uh-huh.
basically stainless
Yeah.
steel or glass. You empty it before security. On the other side, there's all these carbon block filters that are not necessarily as aggressive as I would at home. But now
Yeah.
you don't even have to buy plastic water bottles. You can
It's
literally
true.
fill
I
up.
I am a bit of a water princess. Most airports, I don't like the taste of. I can
Okay.
still smell like the chemicals.
Yeah.
It depends on the airport. Some of them are good. So I do travel with that and I try it first.
But even with
Um,
plastic water bottles, you can look at the ingredients. People don't even realize that even in an airport or in a store,
right.
you could literally, if there's none that are made in glass, obviously that would be a good
Yeah.
choice. But you can look at the ingredients and it'll tell you how that water was cleaned, whether it was made, cleaned by distillation or ozonation, municipal tap, or even reverse osmosis, which I would recommend people, consider because you have
Yeah.
options even when you need to take, to use
Yeah.
plastic water bottles for sure.
Yeah. Which I love again, because you give so much. I think really doable. Again, listeners, don't read the book and try to do everything she says in
Oh,
the book in a weekend. Like that's not, it's a process about one up level. You mentioned detergent. It's funny. That was the first, a homemade cleaning product I made. Mine came out, I did it once and I never did it again. Um, But even like water, when we're talking about what's going in our body, water is a number one hit. And same, really think about that impact as you trade out products over time. And I do have people start with detergent because everything you wear, the sheets you sleep on, the towels you dry with, your dish towels, like everything pretty much is touched by your detergent. And so it's one swap.
yeah.
that,
One swap is a great way.
yeah,
I do one swap a month. You could do,
yeah,
literally there's no pressure. It's a journey. I mean, like I said, but like one swap, I even said to when I first learned about all these cruciferous vegetables, we actually started using one new cruciferous vegetable in our diet per
I love
month.
that.
And
Yeah,
that to me was enough to try one recipe and one food. And I'm telling you, I don't like to cook and I'm busy, but I think that that was just a really interesting learning experience. It didn't last forever, but it was a great attempt to sort of open up
sure.
my mind and expand my palate a little bit to see what else is out there that's yummy.
Yeah, and it's one of my favorite things about when, going to farmers markets is trying. We actually
Yeah.
I see, I'm not perfect. I got my groceries delivered and I am a little bit of a control freak. I don't usually order produce for other people to choose for me. But whatever, I wanted to make a pot of chicken soup. We were sick, and instead of sending me turnips, they sent me high curry turnips, which are one of my favorite vegetables that I had never heard of my entire life until I was doing a community share at a local farm about probably 10, 12 years ago. And it
Mhm.
was in one of the boxes, and they taught me how to, we grow them all the time now. But ours are still seeds in the garden right now. But so that idea of we eat the things we were raised being
Right.
fed, right? And so there are so many veggies that actually really do a lot of work for us.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, food is
and
medicine. Food works for us. So aside from
yeah,
even water, in the book I talk about all the foods that actually are remarkable because they've been around for millions of years, just like our bodies, just like our gut microbiome that needs all of this good stuff. And there are compounds in regular vegetables and produce that actually offset some of the harm that is done to our epigenome, which is our genetic expression. But we know some of these chemicals can affect our epigenome, and these compounds have been remarkable in reducing those changes. So food is medicine, and it's really a powerhouse against, this topic of environmental chemicals that you don't always know that you're exposed to, right? And so I wanted people to know about that and also understand how onions and alliums and that whole group and the sulfur containing foods are so good for the body and how the liver just churns these chemicals up and breaks them down with cruciferous vegetables and all the antioxidants. So it's about empowerment, but it's also about choosing the right things for, really reduction of harm.
which is again so important. And I think so many of our listeners are women because so many with autoimmunity are women. And when you think of something like dim, right? Like it's not just offsetting environmental toxins in that way. I think that this hormone disruption because of the toxins, and you do a beautiful job in the book explaining kind of the why. There's a lot of noise. There's been a lot of noise. And unless somebody is really into this stuff like me and wants to do their own research, right, and gets excited about it, it just becomes noise. And what
Right.
does it really mean? And for so many women, so many of us recycle our estrogen. And so eating these good veggies, we don't need a medication to fix something that's not a medication deficit. We
Right.
just need the things, it's all back to nature, right? You
Oh,
talk about,
fiber is remarkable.
yeah,
Fiber is remarkable for bowel health and colon cancer
yeah,
prevention. Also happens to, sop up a lot of the chemicals in our gut. So you get nutrition from certain foods, but you can also get the
get a little,
mechanical stuff, which is really
yeah.
so important to human evolution and human health. So there's so many, like, I hope I explain these things well because I'm trying to get people to think about the fact that we have the power to do so much. That's
Yes,
the key take home, and
it
some of the
is. And I really
common,
feel
yeah,
that the book is so empowering. And obviously that's the whole reason I started the podcast, right? I
yeah,
remember that point of diagnosis feeling like that was it. I mean, I was basically told yep, expected decline. We'll try to slow it down as much as we can. That was
Yeah.
what I was told. I'm guessing that is not what your patients hear when they come see
No,
you.
actually, they hear a lot of what they haven't heard in a very long time, which I think
Uh-huh.
uh, part of why a lot of people do better just by having me hear them, listen to them,
Yes.
validate them, make sure that even if their labs are normal, doesn't mean that they have
Right.
to. They're
They
they're
don't
feeling
need an antidepressant because they
right,
don't feel
but
well
even
with
like
normal
they look
labs. Yeah.
absolutely. They look great on paper, but they don't feel good. So, I mean, I
Right.
think there's a lot to be said for the way you practice, the way I practice, and how the mind, when you're told positive reinforcement and hopefulness and empowerment, it really changes actually how your health moves forward for
It,
sure.
it, it does on a cellular, we know that on a cellular level, there's big impact there. But when I even reading the book, all of this is, I feel like we have come so far
Yeah.
away from how humans were designed to live that none of this is rocket science. You make it so digestible. You give the science for, again, those of us that love those rabbit holes, or
Right.
just the additional information.
Right.
Because I do feel that accurate information is empowering as well. Um, but if we just simplify the approach to, okay, maybe we're not supposed to drink treated wastewater. Maybe we're not, like all of these things is just getting a little, maybe we are supposed to move our bodies. I loved that you mentioned trampoline and rebounding. Our lymphatic system plays such a huge role, but also that's why I was like, we speak the same language. It should be fun. Who jumps on a
Yeah.
trampoline and is like, oh, I have to exercise?
And,
Like,
and
no,
sit there watching your favorite show while you're trampolining. You
yeah,
don't
it's
have to leave
fun.
the house. You don't have to do much. Don't fall, but yes, I mean,
Right.
it's the idea
Yeah.
to give people as many options to just get their body moving because that too is part of this evolutionary
Right.
anthropological process that we've sort of stumbled over because
Yeah.
life is busy.
Yeah.
We're all busy, but we have to find that time and make it kind of something we enjoy instead of a burden.
Yeah. Well, so where can folks find the book first? And then I have a couple other questions for you, but where's the best place to get Detoxify?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I think it's easiest. Amazon, it comes in the same day, which is so funny because my husband just ordered a few copies. But yeah, no, anything online, certainly, and you can support your local bookstores wherever you feel comfortable. But yeah, and also my website, thesmarthuman.com.
There you
My
go.
handles on social media are the Smart Human, and that's where I post on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. I have a podcast too for environmental health. If you want to do deep dives into breast cancer or integrated cardiology, there's a wonderful interview with Vivian Caminos. All these things, but I also have courses, very small but powerful little courses on thesmarthuman.com. Like one's on heavy metals exposure, one is on EMF radiation, one is on detoxifying. Goes into more detail, of course. So wherever people can find me is fine, or the book, it's pretty much online, or I'm in Princeton. So,
I love it. And I know there's so much I wanted to talk about we didn't get to, but listeners are leaning in because they know as I'm wrapping up, I always ask for what is one step that people can, it's a trick, it's a tough one. One step people can take starting today to improve their health.
one step today to improve their health. I would say the first thing is stop buying junk. I would say, in terms of this topic, I think we save money if we just stop buying a lot of products. I think the more we bring into our home, the more likely we're going to get exposed to stuff we don't even know about. So I'm all about kind of keeping it simple. You know what
I
I mean?
love it. It's
Yeah.
one of the KISS, keep it simple,
Yeah.
stupid. Not that we think you're stupid. This is my big takeaway
I
from
love that premise.
undergrad
Keep
was,
it simple. Buy less and whatever you
yeah.
like, just swap out to better, safer stuff. But we buy a lot of junk. I cleared out a whole drawer, as you know, in the book of plug-in scented, air fresheners, and the whole drawer was filled with every flavor scent of places I wanted to be, ocean breeze and
Uh-huh.
I realized very quickly that that was not something I needed in my life.
Yeah, which is great. I laugh because I used to be like I was also a scentaholic.
Yeah.
before my toxic burden just tipped me. Now I'm so sensitive to fragrance and things, less reactive than I used to be. But I joke because I'm like, I wonder if that's what, I mean, I had candle trays on in every room and a plug-in in my car, all the things. Now I'm like, I wish they would have a button on Uber where you could do the fragrance free
I
when I
know. One
travel
of the biggest
because
areas people always talk about that in terms of the cars, but I mean, I've taken pictures and I'm like, yeah,
yeah, it's awful.
it's awful. But no one they didn't get the memo, and I'm sure
I
they must
know.
have
We're not there
gotten people.
yet.
I don't know, but yeah,
Uh,
maybe eventually we'll give them all copies of Detoxify. We'll let Uber know.
well, I already told you I'm ordering we're gonna stock it at the clinic. It is for anybody even listening on the go. I keep holding the book up, but you just order one. Like you said, support your local store if you still have one, if you're lucky enough to still have a local bookstore, but Amazon is pretty quick. So um Aly, thank you so much for the work you're doing, but the getting the word out there in a way that people can really just take some simple actions, and then hopefully not need a rheumatologist at some point.
That's the
It's
goal. We don't want
amazing.
so let's keep from needing to see me or anyone else in healthcare.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
who
Are
knows?
you working with anybody outside of your physical practice? If somebody is like, oh my gosh, there is such a thing as an integrative rheumatologist?
Yeah, I mean, I have no ego about it. I actually consult with lots of patients all over the country. I can't order or prescribe outside
Mhm.
of, say, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, people who live, and can
Right.
come in to see
Local.
me physically. But a second opinion that came about in the United, with doctors, right? So I always like to weigh in if people want to hear my opinion or at least just contribute, a nutritional or environmental piece. The thing is about Western rheumatologists is they're very excellent at what they do.
Mhm.
I'm not against doctors. I'm not even against, the ones practicing now that maybe didn't get that training, but I'm happy to weigh in so that we support the patient. It's about the patient, not me.
Sure.
As long as people want that opinion, I'm happy to offer it and weigh in. And usually I've never had really any pushback from even other
Yeah,
rheumatologists.
well, most of us are doing what we're doing because we want to help people. And so I do feel like if you have that occasion, if you have a doctor who doesn't want to learn, find another doctor.
Yeah,
Like,
it's probably
but
not a great sign. Yeah,
yeah, you might not be the best match, but so good to know. Check her out on her website, but get the book and just take one step at a time.
for
So
sure.
thank
Yeah,
you
thank
so
you so much,
much.
Julie, for having me and for inviting me into your special community. So I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you. For everyone listening on the go, remember you can get the show notes and transcripts by visiting inspiredliving.show. Hope you had a great time and enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.